So today, we're going to talk about something called motivational architecture. Now, this is about way more than just, managing a team. It's about building an environment on purpose where your people are genuinely driven to do great work, not just punch the clock. Let's dive in.
Have you ever looked around and wondered this? You've got one team and they're absolutely on fire, they're energetic, they're creative, they're just crushing it. And then you have another team, just as talented, and they seem to be, well, just getting by. What is going on there? It turns out the answer usually has nothing to do with the people themselves.
All right, so let's get to the heart of that problem. This is what we call the manager's dilemma. It's this kind of hidden challenge that can totally undermine a team, and often the manager has no idea it's even happening.
When we see performance drop, our first instinct is to think, oh, it's a skill issue, or there's a problem with that person. But really, that's kind of like blaming a plant for wilting in a dark room. The issue isn't the plant, it's the environment, and it's the same at work. The problem usually isn't a talent problem, it's a hidden motivation problem.
And that problem, that disconnect, is what we call the motivation gap. Think of it as this big space between what someone really truly needs to feel fired up about their work and what their job is actually giving them every day. The bigger that gap gets, the less motivation you're going to see. It's really that simple.
Okay, so the mission is to close that gap. But how? Well, that brings us to our next part. We have to figure out what true motivation even is. And I'll give you a hint. It's not about the free snacks in the break room. It's about understanding the difference between what people want and what they actually need.
And this idea right here is absolutely key. When you can pinpoint what really drives a person, you're not just being a nice boss. You are being a much more effective and efficient leader. It saves you so much time and energy, and you get way, way better results. But first, you gotta know what you're looking for.
I want you to think about it like an iceberg. Right there above the water are the wants, the better coffee machine, casual Fridays, those kinds of surface-level perks. They're nice, for sure, but they don't hold the whole thing up. Underneath the water, that's the massive part of the iceberg. Those are the needs, things like autonomy, feeling like your work has purpose, being respected, having a chance to grow. That is the stuff that really matters.
So this brings us right to the how. How do we find that hidden part of the iceberg? This section is all about the practical steps. This isn't guesswork. It's a real methodology you can start using like today.
And here it is, a simple 3-step process. Step 1, start with a clear definition. Before you can find a gap, you need a map, right? So what does a super motivated person in this specific role actually look like? What do they do? Write it down. Step 2, capture needs versus wants. This is all about listening. In your one-on-ones, ask questions that get below the surface. A great one is, what part of your job gives you the most energy? And finally, step 3, identify the gap. Just compare your definition from step 1 with what you heard in step 2. Where's the difference? Boom, that's your motivation gap.
The big takeaway here is just stop trying to be a mind reader. It's exhausting and it doesn't work. Great management isn't some kind of magic, it's a process. This methodology gives you a system you can rely on, so you can replace all that guesswork with actual clarity.
So let's say you do all this work. You find the gaps, you start closing them for your team members. What happens then? What's the payoff for you? Well, this is where all that effort turns into some pretty incredible results.
And it really boils down to 2 huge things. First, you become way more efficient. You can finally get off that hamster wheel of just trying random stuff and hoping something sticks. And second, you become much more effective. Your actions are targeted, they're precise, and they create a real, lasting impact. You're not just busy anymore, you're actually making a difference.
So, to bring this all home, motivation isn't some big, unsolvable mystery. It's an architecture. It's something you can intentionally design and build. And this process of finding and closing the motivation gap, well, that's your blueprint.
So, I'll leave you with this one last question. I want you to think about one person on your team right now. What is one small, tangible step you can take this week to start closing their motivation gap?